Hi there. Welcome to our latest bonus chat. If you missed our podcast looking back at Leicester Tigers v Leinster, be sure to check it out on Apple, Spotify, and all the other usual places. Now, every time a new season rolls around, we spend ages on our podcast trying to work out how the new campaign is going to go. But often, one thing we can't account for in our predictions is new players having a breakthrough season. And someone who definitely fits that bill for both Leinster and Ireland this season is a certain Mr. Paddy McCarthy. He's having quite the time of it so far, isn't he, Hugo?
Yeah, he's had a really impressive start to this season. He's always, he was looked very impressive at underage level. I think we knew that he was going to be a potential big name for Leinster and Ireland going forward if he could keep that going. But he's only had six senior Leinster games before the season, comprising 135 minutes total, I think. So it's not he's not been someone who's necessarily featured particularly prominently for Leinster before this season. I thought we'd see more of him this season. I didn't think he'd make this big an impact. He's had six games for Leinster this season already. He started five of them, and that includes two European starts where he has broadly acquitted himself very well. And obviously there's the four games for the national side as well. And what a kind of meteoric rise he's had there. He's supplanted Jack Boyle, seemingly as the clear backup to Andrew Porter. He's played against the All Blacks in South Africa, and he seems to be the kind of the guy picked out for the future, really, by Andy Farrell and his coaching setup, which is not bad for a 22-year-old who's only in his second year out of the academy. There are still areas, for a position where people often only hit their prime in their 30s and where technique and kind of a bit of experience is maybe more important than in any other position on the pitch. And there's still areas where I think, he just does need more time. And he's not yet a particularly strong scrummager. He was given a tough time by Joe Hayes in the scrum on Saturday. And I think, that's what happens when you've got relatively inexperienced props up against people with a bit more nous and experience behind them. But that game also showed what he does do very well already. He's so powerful and mobile around the park. He hits rucks. He made some really good hard carries in the time that he was on the pitch. And again, just incredibly visible. Sometimes forwards, and this is not a criticism because there's so much of that kind of, famously the unseen work that forwards need to do. But quite often props can kind of disappear amidst the, just the wider kind of game going on. And you only really notice them around scrum time, whereas that's not true of Paddy McCarthy. He's so visible, so prominent, so kind of committed and engaged around the pitch. And that's really important to how Leinster play. It's similar to how Andrew Porter plays. And so he's a very exciting player. Hopefully he continues on this trajectory. Obviously, he's still very, very young and there's plenty of time really to kind of tell whether he does carry on this form. But it is incredibly important, particularly given Ireland's relative lack of depth at prop. This has been something that both Ireland and Leinster have had an issue for a long time, and we've really struggled to find a kind of a high quality loose head to replace Cian Healy and to back up Andrew Porter. We've been very reliant on Porter for a long time, too reliant on Porter. And the emergence of McCarthy, alongside some of the other great young props coming through, hopefully signals that we have got some wider options coming through. But we did just, yeah, I did just want to flag Paddy McCarthy really because over the course of what has been, maybe not the best start to the season from Leinster, there's a few players who've really stood out, and he's been one of them. It's been really impressive to watch and very exciting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his progress kind of reminds me a little bit of the way when Ronan Kelleher came into the Irish team. And he broke through, and he was like, "Oh, we've got this hooker that's going to take us into the future." And he's bro. We had a front row. I think we had a nickname already. We had a nickname for him, Furlong and Porter in the front row. I can't remember what it was, but there were memes and graphics and all this. Then along comes a certain guy called Dan Sheehan and just blows past him. And next thing he's captaining and he's on Lions tours and he's doing all this stuff, which is totally deserved for both of them. And they both deserve to be in that squad. It's just that Dan has proved better. And this is kind of the same thing's kind of happened with Jack Boyle. We were looking for this replacement for Cian Healy. We had Jack Boyle come along. He impressed in many ways coming into the team. We thought he was the kind of the heir apparent to Andrew Porter. But then along comes this guy, Paddy McCarthy. Now, I think in his case, we saw what he could do with the under 20s. We have seen him play. We knew that he was good, but I think that the coaches could see it in the training. And in this is something that they've seen behind the scenes, that this guy is ready for the high, like you say, the highest stage, big matches against the best test sides in the world. This guy is ready to not only just be involved, but to start in them. And he does have scrummaging issues. That's true, and they were shown. They're always going to be, you're always going to come up against props. But like you say, it's his visibility, the way he wants the ball. He wants the ball multiple times in different sequences. He has multiple carries in the same sequence. He just gets involved. He goes looking forward. He's highly visible. He gets us out of tough spots as well. I think there's one time in Leicester he got us out of the 22 all the way to halfway. And that's not the only time he's done that this season. He's very, very prominent around the park. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be penalties at scrums and in the loose. There's going to be things like that in the other, but it's just like you say, when in a time when Leinster have struggled at times and we're not hitting the standards, to see someone like him come through and establish himself in the team, especially when you see Joe already established. And Joe had a similar kind of rise. He came straight into the starting team as well when he reached the top level. So it is great to see. I know there's going to be some cynics out there. We might as well address this. That there's going to be people, oh, he's just picked because he's Leinster. But you've seen in his performances that he has impressed the coaches. He's shown he can do it, and he can show it out in the pitch.
I think Andy Farrell in particular has a kind of form for when he gets excited by a young player, really backing them. We saw it with Mac Hansen a few years ago, for example. We've seen it with Jamie Osborne more recently, and clearly the coaching staff was very excited about what they were seeing in Paddy McCarthy, and they've gone all in on him. And he has got ahead of Jack Boyle, who is no slouch himself, and did have a very impressive last season. So clearly, we don't see what goes on the training pitch. We don't go to see what kind of goes on during the week, but it's clearly an indicator that in both the Leinster and Irish coaching setups have been very impressed by what they've been seeing from him, and from what we have seen on the pitch, on the games. He has really more than delivered.
Absolutely. Well, listen, hopefully, sometimes I get worried about doing these player specific
Commentator
YouTube
curse.
things.
Podcaster curse.
Exactly. But still, I think it is something that is worth mentioning. And nothing can take away from what he's achieved so far this season. And we just hope he gets the opportunity to carry that through for the rest of the season. Okay, listen, that's great, Hugo. Many thanks for that. And if you, the viewer, have any thoughts yourself on Paddy McCarthy or any other Leinster players you'd like to harp on in future, please leave your comments below. And while you're at it, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe as well.